The afternoon air in rural Colorado seemed too still, the kind of silence that pressed in on the eardrums and demanded notice. Harper Lane eased her battered pickup down the gravel drive to Clearwater Horse Rescue, dust swirling behind her like faded memories she couldn't quite shake. Metal gates clanged somewhere out of sight. Wind carried the scent of sun-baked grass and old hay. Harper killed the engine, sat for a moment with her hands on the wheel, and just breathed. For a lot of people, horse rescues were places of hope, second chances, healing. For Harper, it was obligation. She'd gathered a trunk of old tack and a few worn blankets to donate because the idea of anything going to waste gnawed at her. She didn't come for connection. She didn't come for company. She came because it was something to do with her hands on a quiet day, and she needed quiet more than anything. As she stepped out, her boots crunched on the driveway. The rescue's barn was a low-slung shape against the wide Colorado sky, corrugated steel gleaming with the memory of storms. Volunteers waved from the corral. Harper nodded, barely making eye contact. Most folks here had gotten used to her silence over the past year. She was a regular donor, a ghost among them. She popped the truck bed and started unloading tack, the rhythmic clink of metal bits oddly soothing. The world shrank to the task. Leather straps, saddle pads, a bucket of faded brushes. She barely noticed the way her shoulders curled inward, the way she avoided looking at the horses watching her over the fence rails, soft eyes full of questions she didn't want to answer. Then, from somewhere beyond the hay barn, a sound cut through the afternoon. It was a whinny. Not a high, frantic call, but a deep, rolling note that vibrated in her bones. The kind of sound you never forgot, even if you tried. Harper froze. That sound, she knew it. She shouldn't know it. The world seemed to tilt. For a second, she considered ignoring it, convincing herself it was imagination or memory or just another horse. But she couldn't. Her heart thudded once, painfully, and she turned toward the noise. There he was. A bay gelding stood just inside a corral gate, head high, ears pricked, staring straight at her. His coat, though dusty, caught the late light, a shade between copper and chestnut. He was bigger than most of the rescue horses, shoulders broad, stance proud but wary. Harper's brain tried to protect her, filling in every logical explanation. Coincidence? A trick of the mind? A horse that just reminded her. But then, he whinnied again, and it was him. Scout. She didn't remember moving, only that suddenly the world had narrowed to the distance between her and that horse. Her boots scuffed gravel. Every step felt like an eternity, her mind flickering through years she'd spent trying to forget the last time she saw him. Smoke, gunfire, the panic in his eyes as he was loaded into a military transport that never came back. He wasn't supposed to be alive, but neither was she, really. Scout stood still as she approached. A white stripe ran down his face, splitting his expression like an old scar. He lowered his head, nostrils flaring, then pressed his muzzle to her chest, hard enough that the impact forced a gasp from her. For a second, she felt nothing but the rush of breath, the hot exhale through her shirt. His breath was familiar, warm, grassy, full of all the afternoons they'd spent side by side in the field before everything changed. Tears threatened, but she bit them back. She didn't cry. She couldn't. Not yet. Her hand, shaking, reached up to brush his cheek. The skin was rough beneath the soft hair, and she found herself tracing the old nick on his ear. A military notch. A mark that shouldn't be here. Shouldn't exist outside classified reports and dusty Army records. A volunteer called out, "Ma'am, you okay?" Harper barely heard them. All she could do was stare into Scout's dark, liquid eyes, searching for the friend she lost. The friend the world had told her was gone. He pressed closer, letting out a low sigh. The sound said everything she couldn't. She tried to speak, tried to say his name, but her throat closed, so she just stood, motionless, absorbing the impossible weight of the moment. Scout's body trembled, and she saw it then. the faint scars along his flank, the white patch where the hair never grew back. Signs of things done to him after he left her. She swallowed, fury and grief warring inside her. How many nights had she wondered if he'd suffered? How many times had she blamed herself for not fighting harder to keep him safe? The world snapped back as the volunteer stepped closer. "Ma'am, you know this horse?" Harper found her voice, brittle and small. "Yeah, I know him. I thought he was a stray. Picked him up off the highway last month. He's, something else. Skittish as hell. Doesn't let anyone touch him, but he just walked right up to you?" The volunteer's eyes were wide with disbelief. Harper nodded, swallowing hard. She ran her hand down Scout's neck, feeling the tension in his muscles, the way he trembled under her touch. He wasn't just a horse. He was a survivor. Like her. She turned to the volunteer, words coming slow. "His name is Scout. He served with me, overseas." A stunned silence. "You're kidding." Harper shook her head, never taking her eyes off Scout. "No, I'd know him anywhere." Scout nickered softly, the sound so full of longing and loss that it shattered something inside her. For the first time in years, Harper let herself believe in something impossible. Not hope exactly, something sharper. The knowledge that some things, some bonds, survived war, distance, and every effort to erase them. As the sun dipped lower, painting the corral in gold and shadow, Harper leaned her forehead against Scout's. For a moment, the world was only heartbeats and breath, and as Scout exhaled, trusting, solid, real, Harper Lane understood. This was no accident. This was the start of something that would drag them both out of the dark, whether they were ready or not. The sky was the color of steel by the time Harper loaded Scout into her old two-horse trailer. The rescue's director, a kind-faced woman named Lynette, kept asking if she was sure, if she really wanted to take home a horse with scars, a horse that spooked at shadows and lashed out at anyone who got too close. Harper only nodded, barely saying a word as she signed the paperwork and slipped a halter over Scout's wary head. The horse didn't resist her. He just followed, head low, as if he'd finally run out of places to go. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every bump on the country road made Scout stomp and snort behind her, the trailer creaking with the shifting weight of old trauma. Harper kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half afraid he'd vanish again, that she'd wake up and find it had all been some cruel trick of the mind. But every time, there he was, solid, real, and waiting. Her ranch wasn't much, just a rundown barn, a couple of weed-choked paddocks, and a house that creaked at night like it remembered better days. She'd bought it with her discharge pay, thinking maybe she could outrun her memories in the Colorado quiet. But the silence had only grown heavier, year after year, until she barely remembered how to speak. Scout hesitated at the trailer's edge, nostrils flaring as he took in the scent of dust and pine. Harper stood aside, patient, letting him choose. After a tense moment, he stepped out, his hooves striking gravel with a sharp and final note. She led him into the barn. The place smelled of old hay and oil, shadows pooling in the corners. Scout's ears flicked at every creak. He paused at the doorway, eyes darting over the unfamiliar stalls and rafters, then jerked his head toward a rusty gate that squealed in the wind. Harper watched him carefully, saw how his whole body tensed at the smallest sound, the flapping of a tarp, the groan of wood. He was different now, changed in ways she understood all too well. That night, Harper set him up in the largest stall, spreading clean straw and filling the water buckets to the brim. She didn't bother turning on the old radio or humming like she used to. Scout's eyes followed her everywhere, tracking her every movement. When she tried to brush his mane, he flinched at first, backing away until his rump pressed hard against the stall door. She stopped, letting the brush fall to her side, and simply sat on an overturned feed bucket, waiting. Eventually, he crept forward and sniffed at her boots, his breath warm against her ankle. As she watched him, pieces of memory slipped through the cracks. Bright flashes of noise and fear. She saw Scout rearing on a rain-slicked tarmac, his mane tangled with sweat and mud, the crackle of radios, the smell of burning fuel, the distant scream of artillery. She remembered the last time she saw him, the moment the handlers tried to load him into a cargo plane. He'd bucked and twisted, terror in his eyes, as she shouted his name over the chaos. Then he was gone, lost to bureaucracy and indifference. Now, in the safety of her barn, he was just as restless. Scout jumped every time the gates creaked, trembling when she set down his grain bucket too hard. If anyone walked behind him, even Harper, he snapped his head around, ears pinned, ready to flee or fight. Once, when she closed the stall door behind him, he panicked, chewing desperately at the latch until she opened it again. His teeth marks were already visible on the old wood. That first week, Harper barely slept. She found herself listening for every noise, for the sound of hooves on concrete or the bang of a stall door. Sometimes, in the dead of night, she'd hear Scout moving restlessly, pawing at the straw or rattling his water bucket. One night, she caught him standing perfectly still, in the dark, staring at nothing, his breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. Yeah, she recognized the look. She'd worn it herself, too many nights to count. She tried everything she remembered from deployment, soft words, steady hands, long walks along the fence line. Nothing helped at first. Scout remained silent, chewing at stall latches, pacing the length of his small world. Harper brought in an old friend, a local vet named Dr. Shelby, hoping a checkup might calm them both. But as soon as Shelby entered the barn, Scout spun, pressing himself against the back wall, eyes rolling with fear. "He's carrying a lot," Shelby said quietly, after managing only a brief examination. "It's not just physical. There's a world in his head that none of us can see." Harper nodded. "I know." On the fourth night, a thunderstorm rolled in, rattling the windows and shaking the barn. Lightning flashed. And for a moment, Scout froze. Then, as thunder cracked overhead, he exploded, kicking the stall door, screaming in a way Harper hadn't heard since the worst days overseas. She ran to him, grabbing his halter and talking low and steady, anchoring them both to the present. "Easy, buddy. You're home now. No more bombs, no more smoke, just rain." It took nearly an hour to calm him. Harper stood with him, hands on his trembling neck, until the storm passed. When he finally let out a deep, shuddering sigh, she felt something inside her shift too, a crack in the armor she'd built around her own heart. That night, as she sat outside his stall, her back pressed to the cool wood, Harper let herself remember the missions, the chaos, the last time she saw Scout running into the smoke as a helicopter lifted off, leaving her behind. The branded ear notch, the whip scars, the military ID burned into his flank. He should have been retired, sent to pasture, given a peaceful ending. Instead, he'd survived, scarred and silent, just like her. As the first hints of dawn crept through the barn's broken windows, Harper found herself whispering, almost praying. "We're not supposed to be here, you and me, but we are. And I won't let them take you again." Scout shifted, turning his head to nudge her shoulder. It was the smallest gesture, but it felt like a promise, one survivor to another. As light spilled across the straw, Harper finally felt the first flicker of hope. They weren't healed. Not yet. But for the first time in years, she believed they could be. Morning broke pale and cold over the ranch. Harper stood at the window with a mug of coffee, watching fog roll off the fields as Scout pawed the ground in the paddock. He'd slept at her place for a week, but sleep still didn't come easy to either of them. Sometimes, when the wind moaned around the barn or a truck backfired on the distant highway, she'd see the wildness light up in his eyes, panic flickering just beneath the surface. It was the scars that haunted her most. The fresh ones, crisscrossing his shoulders, a patch of fur rubbed raw behind his ear, and the old, nearly invisible military ID burned into the skin above his flank. That mark was supposed to mean retired, safe. But nothing about Scout was safe or retired, and neither was Harper. She sipped her coffee and tried to convince herself she was being paranoid. But the questions kept circling, relentless. Where had Scout gone all this time? Who hurt him? Why did he come back now? And how had he survived? She needed answers, and there was only one person who might have them, Captain J.T. Reyes, her old commanding officer. She hadn't spoken to Reyes in years. The last time they'd talked, it was all clipped orders and tired apologies over a fuzzy radio. Harper's hand shook as she scrolled through her contacts and dialed the number she'd memorized back in Afghanistan. The phone rang 4 times, and she was about to hang up when a gruff voice answered. "Lane?" She exhaled. "Yeah, it's me." Reyes's tone shifted, softer, with a weight that only came from seeing too much. "It's been a while, Harper. What's up?" "I found Scout." She didn't bother with small talk. "He's here, with me." And there was silence on the line, broken only by Reyes's slow, controlled breathing. "That's not possible. I know how it sounds, but it's him, sir. The scars, the notch in his ear, the way he moves, everything. He found me at a rescue outside Fort Collins. No paperwork, no record, just there." Reyes didn't answer for a long moment, then quietly. "He was never declared dead, just gone, disappeared after that last op. We thought he got caught in the crossfire, taken by locals. Military said he wasn't a priority." Harper gritted her teeth. "Someone hurt him, Reyes. He's got new scars. He flinches at every sound, and there's an ID burn that shouldn't be there anymore." A heavy sigh. "I was afraid of this. A few keystrokes clicked over the line. "Look, Lane, there's been rumors. Black market buyers, old service horses repurposed for whatever someone will pay for. Most don't come back. Praxis Equine Security's name keeps popping up. You heard of them?" Harper's stomach twisted. "Yeah, I've seen them at events. Private firm, right? Security, search and rescue contracts, even celebrity clients, sometimes." "They're more than that," Reyes said. "We've tracked a dozen thefts. Military horses vanish after decommissioning, turn up months later in Praxis's hands. No oversight, no accountability. Horses get retrained, repurposed, or, if they're too scarred, put down. Nobody talks about it. Too much money, too many connections." "And Scout?" Harper pressed. "He went missing on a day Praxis was working as a subcontractor. I tried to follow the trail, but everything went cold. They moved the animals around, erased records, rebrand them. If Scout made it back to you, it wasn't because anyone wanted him to. He must have gotten away." Harper stared at her boots, anger and guilt warring inside her. "So what now?" "I'll dig," Reyes promised. "See what I can shake loose. But Lane, if you have Scout, watch your back. Praxis doesn't like loose ends, and they don't like witnesses." The call ended, but the words lingered. Harper felt the old tension return, her body coiled tight, every sense alert. She went outside, where Scout waited by the fence, blowing clouds of steam into the chilly morning air. His eyes followed her, full of recognition and something like relief. She reached out and stroked his nose, feeling the ridges of old scars beneath her fingers. "You remember him, don't you?" she whispered. "You remember everything?" That day, Harper spent hours on her laptop, scouring the internet for anything on Praxis Equine Security. Their website was all glossy photos and buzzwords. Elite training, world-class equine services, integrity, excellence, service. But if you dug deeper, the message boards told a different story. Anonymous posts described horses going missing, handlers threatened into silence, investigations that fizzled before they began. One message stuck with her. They take the best, break the rest. You're lucky if yours just disappears. She printed out every scrap of information, started a folder, and locked it in her desk drawer. As the afternoon sun bled through the kitchen window, she realized how quiet the house was, not peaceful, just waiting, like the hush before a storm. Later, she found Scout chewing anxiously at his stall latch, wood splintering beneath his teeth. When she reached for him, he snapped his head up, eyes wild. She froze, then knelt down, lowering herself until she was at eye level, letting him come to her. Slowly, he relaxed, lips brushing her sleeve. She remembered the last time she'd seen fear like this, her own, reflected in a bathroom mirror back at base. Hands trembling as she tried to scrub the desert from her skin. Some things you never washed away. That night, Harper dreamed of smoke and shouts, of Scout running blind through chaos, a helicopter hovering overhead. She woke before dawn, heart pounding, cold sweat slicking her skin. She pulled on a hoodie and went to the barn where Scout stood quietly in the dim light. She pressed her forehead to his, breathing in the warm, grassy scent of his mane. "We're not done," she whispered. "We're not hiding. We find the truth together." A little later, she dialed Reyes again. "You said you were tracking other thefts. Anyone local? Maybe." "There's a pattern," he said. "Praxis likes to keep things close, move horses from one holding to another, erase their history. I'll send someone to check in. Until then, lay low. If Scout remembers faces, you need to know who's looking for him." Harper nodded, though he couldn't see her. "Understood." The day passed in a strange rhythm, feeding, mucking stalls, checking locks twice, then 3 times. The old barn felt smaller, shadows stretching long as dusk fell. Outside, coyotes howled in the distant hills. Inside, Harper sat in the tack room, gun on the table, folders of evidence spread before her. Scout nudged the door, soft and persistent, until she let him in. He stood beside her, resting his chin on her shoulder as if to say, "We made it this far. Don't quit now." As the darkness deepened, Harper looked at the folder, the stolen horses, the erased names, the firm that thought they could rewrite history. Not this time. She'd spent too long letting other people decide who mattered, who survived. This time, she'd fight for both of them. The autumn wind had picked up, turning the ranch air crisp and restless. Dry leaves swirled along the fence line, and the sun dropped early, as if the world itself was retreating. Harper felt it in her bones. A subtle shift, a tension that set her teeth on edge. It started small. One morning, she found tire marks in the soft dirt just outside the main gate. Too fresh, too close. At first, she tried to explain it away, blaming a lost delivery truck or a neighbor with a curious dog. But the unease lingered, threading through her days. Scout noticed it too. He became more alert, his posture tight and wary whenever Harper led him out to the paddock. Where before he'd graze quietly or stand beside her as she worked, now he watched the horizon, ears flicking at every sound. One afternoon, as Harper raked the yard, Scout suddenly froze, his entire body rigid. He snorted, nostrils flaring, and stared at the distant fence line. There was nothing Harper could see, just a shimmer of heat and shadow. Still, she trusted his instincts. She'd seen too many lives saved by a horse's warning. Later that week, Harper discovered one of the gates unlatched. She was obsessive about her routines, every latch checked, every chain secured, always in the same order. The gate swung open with a lazy squeak, and for a moment she stood there, the wind at her back, heart hammering. She closed it, ran her palm over the metal, and tried to find fingerprints, smudges, anything. Nothing but her own reflection staring back. That night, Harper moved a cot into the tack room. She didn't bother with excuses. She told herself it was just for a night, just until she felt safe. But as she lay in the dark, gun resting within arm's reach on the feed bin, she listened to Scout moving restlessly in his stall, and the old instincts came roaring back. Hyper-aware, senses sharpened by fear. She barely slept. 2 days later, as dusk slipped over the ranch like a warning, Harper heard a strange buzzing above the barn. She stepped outside, shotgun slung low across her back, and scanned the sky. At first, she thought it was a swarm of bees or a passing plane. But the sound was too mechanical, too deliberate. Then she saw it. A small drone hovering, its red light blinking as it circled the property. Harper's first instinct was to shoot it out of the sky. But she held back, instead tracking it with her phone's camera. snapping a dozen photos as it darted and dipped, surveying the land. Scout reared in the paddock, slamming his hooves into the earth, sweat breaking out across his flanks. The drone lingered, then zipped away, vanishing beyond the hills. She sent the photos to Reyes that night, attaching a terse message. "They're watching us." Within the hour, Reyes called back. "You're not paranoid. I've seen the same model used in a couple of other cases. Praxis loves their toys. Lane, you can't fight this alone. I'm sending someone out in the morning, one of my old guys. Trust him. He'll help you set up surveillance, reinforce your locks." "Can I trust anyone?" Harper asked, the words sharp, desperate. "You can trust me," Reyes replied. "And you can trust Scout. Sometimes that's enough." The next morning, a black SUV crunched up her drive. A man in his 50s stepped out, lean and watchful, with the cautious gait of someone who'd spent years carrying more than his share of burdens. "Name's Dalton," he said, flashing a badge just long enough for her to see. "Reyes sent me." Dalton set to work immediately, walking the perimeter, noting blind spots, helping Harper mount small cameras along the fence and above the barn door. He swapped out padlocks, showed her how to set silent alarms, and gave her a crash course in counter surveillance. All the while, Scout trailed them, ears pinned, eyes darting, never letting Dalton out of his sight. "You weren't kidding," Dalton murmured, scratching Scout's neck with gentle fingers. "This one's seen some things. So have you, I bet." Harper shrugged, uncomfortable. "We both have scars." Dalton nodded, and for a while they worked in companionable silence. But the sense of being watched never left. Harper checked the cameras constantly, scanning for movement, for headlights, for any sign of trespassers. Every time she left the house, she double-checked the locks, kept the gun close. The old life had taught her one thing. Vigilance was survival. That evening, Harper walked Scout around the paddock, trying to ease the tension. The horse pressed close, his sides trembling as he followed her lead. She whispered to him, not caring how it sounded. Soft nonsense. Promises of safety, of home. As twilight deepened, she caught a glint of something at the far end of the property, just beyond the fence in the shadow of a dying cottonwood. It was gone before she could focus, but Scout jerked sideways, almost pulling the lead rope from her hands. "Easy," she soothed, heart pounding. Dalton met her at the barn door, his voice low. "Saw it too. Someone's checking you out. Could be casing the place. Could be worse. You armed?" Harper nodded. Always. Keep it that way." She waited until full dark before turning off the lights and making her rounds. The barn was quiet, the world outside muffled by wind and the steady hum of insects. Scout dozed lightly, still twitching at every unfamiliar sound. Harper lay awake on the cot, staring at the ceiling, listening for footsteps in the gravel. She thought about calling Reyes again, telling him she wanted out, that it wasn't worth it. But then she remembered Scout's eyes, the terror that never quite faded. And she knew she couldn't walk away. Around midnight, the silent alarm tripped, a soft vibration on her phone, almost easy to ignore. She slipped from the cot, moving like she had in the old days, muscles remembering every lesson drilled into her in dust and heat. She checked the cameras, nothing but darkness, the world a grainy blur of black and white. But Dalton was already outside, flashlight off, moving silent as a ghost. They found nothing but a set of boot prints by the back gate, half-moon shapes pressed into the mud. Dalton knelt, studying them. Whoever it was, they're not amateurs. Didn't break in, just wanted you to know they could. Harper stared at the prints, rage simmering beneath her fear. "They want Scout." Dalton stood, his jaw tight. "They want something? But you're not alone anymore?" Scout snorted from the barn, pacing restlessly, mane tangled from sleep. Harper went to him, pressing her hand to his neck, feeling the thunder of his heart beneath her palm. We'll get through this," she whispered, more to herself than him. In the coming days, the feeling of being watched only grew. Strange cars lingered on the road, drones buzzed by at odd hours, and Harper's nerves stretched thin as wire. But she never let her guard down, not for a second. She slept in the tack room, gun by the door, folders of evidence stacked beside her cot. Every morning she checked Scout for new injuries, new scars, any sign that someone had gotten too close. One evening, Dalton handed her a small black box, a GPS tracker he'd found taped beneath her truck's bumper. Harper's hands shook as she tossed it into the fire pit, watching it melt to slag. "They're getting bolder," Dalton said. "But so are we." Harper nodded, eyes hard. "Let them come. I won't let them take him again. Not ever." Scout pressed his muzzle against her arm, solid and real, a living promise that whatever was coming, they'd face it together. And somewhere in the darkness, beyond the lights, someone was watching, waiting. The next move belonged to them. The wind was howling that night, rattling the old barn doors and carrying a cold bite that crept through every crack. In Harper's battered ranch house, she lay on the cot in the tack room, eyes wide open in the darkness, one hand draped over the pistol at her side. Scout was restless, pacing his stall, snorting every time a gust hit the tin roof. Dalton had gone home hours earlier, promising to return the next day, but Harper knew trouble wouldn't wait for daylight. Sometime past midnight, the barn's world shifted. The silence, already stretched thin, broke with a sharp click, then another. Harper's phone buzzed softly, the silent alarm Dalton had wired to the fence line. She rolled from the cot without a sound, grabbing her pistol and sliding the barn's side door open an inch. Darkness, only the hush of wind and the faint smell of smoke. But Harper's gut told her someone was there. Several someones, moving quiet as wolves. Scout sensed it too. He stamped once, twice, a warning that made Harper's pulse leap. She stayed low, crawling toward the corner window. Moonlight glinted off the outline of a figure near the back gate. Then two more, all dressed in black, moving with the practiced silence of men who'd done this before. They cut the power to the barn, plunging everything into blackness. Adrenaline surged. Harper's mind flicked into combat mode, every breath measured, every sound cataloged. She slid her finger along the trigger guard and waited. The men split up, one heading for the main stall doors, another circling the feed room, the third posted at the side exit. Scout's stall was closest to the feed room. Harper saw a shadow move, heard the faint jingle of keys as someone worked the lock. Scout reared, slamming his hooves against the metal gate, eyes wide, foam flecking his mouth. The intruder tried to grab his halter, but Scout lunged, teeth bared. The man cursed, stumbling back, and Harper used the moment to move. She crept behind a stack of hay bales, heart pounding. The third man, nearest the side exit, scanned the room with a flashlight, slicing through the gloom. Harper waited until he passed, then rose in a blur and took him down with an old hand-to-hand move, knocking the flashlight aside and jabbing the muzzle of her pistol into his back. "Don't move," she growled. He froze, breathing hard. From across the barn, Scout kicked down his stall door with a crash that echoed like thunder. He charged at the first intruder, who dove aside, barely escaping the massive hooves. The horse wheeled and turned, planting himself between Harper and the others, a living barrier. The second man rushed Harper, swinging a metal pipe. She ducked under the blow, grabbing his arm and twisting, using his momentum to slam him into the barn wall. He groaned and dropped the weapon. The first intruder, shaken by Scout's charge, tried to dart for the side exit, but Harper blocked his path. He raised his hands. "Don't shoot! We just want the horse." "Not happening," Harper snapped. Scout, breathing hard, stood guard over the man pinned to the wall. His muscles trembled with adrenaline and fear, but he didn't back down. Harper recognized the look in his eyes. Pure fight. Pure survival. A flashlight beam sliced through the night. Dalton's truck screeched up the drive, tires spitting gravel. He leaped out, shotgun in hand, shouting, "Freeze! Police are on their way!" The remaining intruders scattered. One vaulted the fence and disappeared into the trees. The other tripped over a water bucket and was tackled by Dalton before he could escape. Harper kept her gun trained on the man at her feet, rage burning in her chest. "Who sent you?" she demanded. The man just glared, jaw clenched. Dalton hauled the others to their feet, zip-tying their wrists with a practiced efficiency. "We'll let the sheriff sort them out." he said grimly. "But I'd bet my pension they're with Praxis." Within minutes, red and blue lights flashed along the gravel road. The local sheriff's deputies swept in, weapons drawn, barking questions. Harper put her hands up, identifying herself, and let them secure the barn. Scout paced in tight circles, nostrils flaring until Harper could reach him and stroke his neck. He shivered beneath her touch, the fight draining from his body all at once. The deputies questioned everyone, piecing together the story from Harper and Dalton's breathless account. One intruder refused to speak, the other two mumbled about orders and just a job. It was enough for the sheriff to haul them off for trespassing and attempted burglary. As they were led away, one shot a venomous look at Harper. "This isn't over." Dalton pulled her aside. "We have to get ahead of this, Lane. They weren't just after Scout. They were after what he knows, or what he's carrying. Praxis wouldn't send a team unless there was something big at stake." Harper nodded, muscles still humming with adrenaline. "I'm done running." We hit back. By dawn, Reyes arrived in person, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. He shook Harper's hand, then knelt to examine Scout, checking the branded ear notch and scars. "They marked him for a reason," he muttered. "We'll get answers." Scout's old deployment photo hung in Harper's tack room, a silent witness to everything they'd lost and found again. Now, as the first light spilled across the shattered stall door and muddy boot prints, Harper realized there was no going back. The war she thought she'd left behind had found her again, here among the horses and the wind. Reyes met with the sheriff, reviewing the men's IDs. "They're Praxis contractors," he confirmed, voice grim. "The company's hands are all over this. These guys weren't here to steal a horse. They were here to erase evidence. Scouts saw something, or he's carrying something they want to disappear." Dalton patched up the stall door and reset the alarms. Harper brewed coffee for everyone, hands still shaking, voice barely above a whisper. "If they come back, they will," Reyes interrupted gently. "But next time, we'll be ready." Scout rested his head against Harper's shoulder, his body finally still. She realized, with a surge of pride and pain, that he had fought for her as much as she had fought for him. And whatever secrets he carried, they'd get to the truth. Together. Outside, the sun rose over a battered ranch, painting gold over scars and broken fences. But inside, Harper and Scout stood stronger than before. The enemy had come for them in the dark. They'd answered with courage, defiance, and the promise that nothing, no company, no shadowy past, would ever take them down again. Sunrise washed the ranch in bruised gold. After the chaos of the night before, the world felt too quiet, like everything was holding its breath. Harper moved slowly through the barn, exhaustion heavy in her limbs. Scout dozed in his stall, sides rising and falling in deep, uneven breaths. There were new cuts on his legs, but nothing serious. A miracle, given the violence. Harper crouched beside him, gently inspecting each scrape, her mind whirling with everything Reyes and Dalton had said about secrets and stolen evidence. After patching up Scout and setting out fresh water, Harper called Dr. Shelby, the vet, asking her to come out first thing. Dalton stayed nearby, eyes on the fence line, never more than a few feet from his gun. They were all on edge, but the sense of urgency was different now. Last night proved Praxis was desperate. Scout wasn't just a loose end, he was a key. Dr. Shelby arrived just after 7 a.m., stifling a yawn as she unloaded her bag. "Heard you had excitement," she said, kneeling beside Scout and giving him a reassuring pat. She ran practice hands over his neck and shoulders, murmuring quiet encouragement as she checked for broken bones. Scout stood still, only flinching when her fingers found the rough scar hidden in his mane. An old, barely healed nick near the crest of his neck. Shelby paused, frowning. "Did you notice this before? Feels like something's under the skin. Scarred tissue, maybe, or something else." Harper stepped closer, anxiety flaring. "What do you mean?" "Hold him steady." Shelby pulled on gloves, then used a fine scalpel to gently part the tangled hair and scrape away dried blood. Scout quivered, but didn't move. A moment later, Shelby extracted a tiny, hard object from the skin. a plastic capsule, smaller than a pencil eraser. Harper stared at it, dread settling in her gut. What the hell is that? Shelby cleaned it with saline and held it up to the light. It's not an ID chip. Looks like some kind of data tag. Military grade, maybe? Oh, this was planted intentionally. Could have been there for months, Dalton whistled softly, taking the capsule with gloved hands. Encrypted by the look of it. Reyes needs to see this. Within the hour, Reyes was at the kitchen table, laptop open, the capsule sitting next to his coffee. I've seen these before, he said, voice low. Micro-encapsulated tags, covert stuff, only used when the Allied saying they want to move information without leaving a digital trail. Usually gets embedded in gear or sometimes living carriers. Never thought I'd see one in a horse. He slid the capsule into a small USB reader, holding his breath as encrypted files flashed onto the screen. Logs, GPS records, some kind of manifest. Give me a minute. Harper hovered at his shoulder, hands clenched so tight her knuckles ached. On the screen, a map blinked to life, overlaid with dozens of red lines, routes snaking across the Middle East, then jumping continents. There were timestamps, coordinates, and codes she barely understood. Some were flagged urgent, others off books. Reyes frowned, scrolling through pages of text. This is more than horse transport logs. Look, cargo manifests too. Weapons, medical shipments, and... Here. This list has restricted biopharma compounds, stuff that's banned under international law. These are black market runs. Praxis was moving illegal tech and drugs under cover of military contracts, using horses like Scout for covert drops. Harper's mind reeled. They used him as a courier? Looks that way. When Scout disappeared, Praxis must have repurposed him, changed his ID, used his military clearance to sneak shipments through checkpoints. When he got out, when he escaped, he brought this evidence with him. I'd bet my badge Praxis had no idea he was carrying it. Maybe they knew, and that's why they wanted him back so badly. Dalton let out a low curse. No wonder they sent a team. If this gets out, Praxis is finished. Harper's heart pounded, the pieces slotting into place. Scout didn't just survive. He outsmarted them. Reyes started copying files, face grim. We'll get this to the feds. It's enough to bring down half their leadership. But Lane, you need to understand, they won't quit. You and Scout are both targets now. Stay locked down. I'll get marshals out here as soon as I can. Harper nodded, suddenly feeling every hour of the sleepless night. She looked at Scout, who was staring at her with those deep, knowing eyes, as if he understood everything that was happening. She walked into his stall and wrapped her arms around his neck, resting her head against the scar where the capsule had been hidden. You did it, boy. You brought the truth home. The rest of the day passed in a blur of calls and preparations. Dalton reinforced every lock, rechecked every camera, and drove the perimeter twice. Harper drafted a statement with Reyes for the authorities, outlining everything from Scout's rescue to the break-in. The local sheriff sent 2 deputies to sit at the end of the driveway, their presence both reassuring and a reminder that the world had shifted. As night crept in, Harper found herself unable to relax. She made rounds every hour, flashlight cutting through shadows, double-checking that Scout was safe in his stall. The fear was different now, not just for her own life, but for Scout's. If anything happened to him, the evidence might be lost forever. More than that, she couldn't bear the thought of losing him again, not after everything he'd fought through. At midnight, Harper sat in the tack room, staring at the deployment photo of Scout, young, strong, unscarred, standing tall beside her younger self in a desert she barely remembered. She wondered what he'd seen, what he'd endured, what memories haunted him when the world went quiet. There was a kinship in that. The shared trauma, the unspoken wounds. Dr. Shelby stopped by again before dawn, bringing strong coffee and her own quiet presence. He's special, that one, she murmured, scratching Scout's muzzle. Some animals survive the worst and still find their way home. Not everyone does. Harper didn't answer, but she squeezed Shelby's hand, grateful for the company. Together they watched Scout doze in the straw, his breath finally slow and even. The weight of secrets lifted, at least for now. Later that morning, Reyes called with an update. FBI's got the files. Praxis is officially under investigation. They're moving fast. Expect some pushback. Elaine? You and Scout, you're heroes in this, whether you like it or not. Harper managed a tired smile. We just did what we had to. Reyes laughed, the sound thin but genuine. That's what all the real heroes say. Hang tight. The hard part's almost over. But Harper knew better. The storm was still coming. Praxis would fight back. They always did. But now she and Scout had the truth on their side, and for the first time since the war, she believed that might be enough. Scout nudged her as if to say, "We're not running anymore, Ards." And Harper, feeling braver than she had in years, let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. The days blurred into a tense waiting game. Every sunrise brought news. Praxis's legal team scrambling, anonymous threats left on Harper's voicemail, drones buzzing the property at odd hours before vanishing into the treetops. Harper grew used to sleeping in boots, a loaded shotgun resting against the tack room wall. Through it all, Scout became her constant shadow, alert to every stranger's scent on the wind. But even as the world pressed in, the most disturbing questions remained unanswered. Who had handled Scout during those missing years? Who taught him to flinch at every footfall, to panic when a man raised his voice? What had he truly seen, and what did he remember? Reyes kept digging. "I got a name," he told Harper one afternoon, voice gravelly with exhaustion over the phone. Briggs Maddox, former handler for Praxis, was on the ground the day Scout went missing. Not just some desk jockey. He's been accused of animal abuse. But nothing's ever stuck. Every horse that comes through his hands either disappears or ends up scarred. If anyone knows what happened to Scout, it's him. And the name sent a chill through Harper. She'd heard rumors about Maddox during her deployments. Stories whispered in mess halls and stables. Men like that didn't just hurt animals. They covered their tracks with corpses, human or not. "We have to be very sure," Harper said. If Scout recognizes him," Reyes cut in. "That's what I was thinking. Can you get a photo of Maddox to show him? I'll send one over, but be careful. If Scout reacts, that's the proof we need." A few hours later, Dalton showed up with a printed photo. Maddox was in his late 40s, a hulking figure with sun-baked skin and eyes that looked straight through the camera. There was something cold in that stare, something Harper had seen before in men who believed the world owed them fear. Harper brought the photo out to the paddock. Scout grazed at the far end, head down, tail flicking at flies. She approached quietly, holding the photo behind her back, her heart drumming. She called his name, voice steady. Scout's ears perked, but he didn't move. Gently, Harper held the photo where he could see it. "Scout, do you remember this man?" At first, nothing. Then Scout's nostrils flared, eyes focusing. For a heartbeat, Harper thought maybe he didn't care. Maybe the years had blurred faces the way they blurred pain. But then Scout recoiled. So fast and violent, she barely had time to step back. His ears slammed flat against his skull. He snorted, teeth bared, stamping the ground with such force Harper felt it in her bones. He snorted again, nostrils wide, and whirled in a tight circle. The panic in his eyes was unmistakable. Not just fear, but rage. The kind of terror that came from deep, unhealed wounds. Harper's breath caught. She dropped the photo and stepped back, hands open. "It's okay, boy. He's not here. You're safe. He can't hurt you anymore." But Scout kept pacing, muscles bunched and quivering. He kicked at the fence, leaving a dent in the old wood, then turned to Harper, sides heaving. Only after long minutes of soft words and outstretched hands did he let her near. She pressed her forehead to his, both of them trembling. Dalton, who'd watched the whole thing from a distance, whistled. "That's a memory lane. You don't get a reaction like that unless there's something to remember." Harper picked up the photo, anger boiling inside her. He did this. Maddox did this to Scout, and God knows how many others. She sent a video of Scout's reaction to Reyes. Within the hour, the captain called back, voice grim and determined. That's the confirmation we needed. We're moving forward. Marshals are prepping a sting, and Maddox is going to walk right into it. But Lane, you need to watch yourself. If he knows you're involved, he'll get desperate. I'm not backing down, Harper said, steel in her voice. If Maddox comes for Scout, he'll have to go through me. The next days were a blur of tension. Harper added extra bolts to every door, checking them twice before sunset. Dalton taught her tricks he'd learned in the service, how to spot a tripwire in moonlight, how to listen for a boot on wet grass. Every creak of the barn, every distant engine on the road set Harper's nerves jangling. Yet, through it all, she saw Scout change. The initial panic from seeing Maddox's photo faded, replaced by something else, a wary alertness. The horse seemed to sense the end was near, that the shadows closing in weren't just in his mind. At night, he stood guard at the paddock gate, ears flicking, body angled toward the dark as if waiting for an old enemy to reappear. One evening, Harper found herself staring at the photo of Maddox, tracing the lines of his face, trying to burn the image into her memory. She thought of all the nights Scout had stood alone, waiting for kindness or cruelty, never knowing which would come. She swore then, no matter what happened, she'd be the last person to fail him. She called Reyes again, voice low. If Maddox comes for him, if Praxis tries to take Scout, I won't run. We make our stand here. Reyes didn't argue. That's why I picked you for this, Lane. You don't give up. Harper hung up and went to Scout, standing with him beneath the vast, silent sky. She ran her hand along his neck, feeling the old scars and the new. We're almost there, she whispered. Just one more fight, and then it's over. I promise. Scout pressed his head into her chest, exhaling a long, shuddering breath. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was trust. And for Harper, that was enough. The night was quiet, but Harper didn't sleep. She watched the stars move overhead, counting the hours until dawn. In the darkness, she thought of Maddox, of all the lives he'd broken, all the stories erased by men like him. She wondered what justice would look like, whether it would ever be enough. But as Scout stood watch beside her, fierce and unbroken, Harper realized that sometimes survival itself was the best revenge. That to remember, to fight, to endure, to bring the truth to light, was the greatest victory of all. And when morning finally came, it brought with it a hard, clear resolve. Harper would face whatever came next, not as a victim, but as a survivor. For Scout, for every animal Maddox had tried to break, and for the pieces of herself that were finally coming home. The air over the ranch was charged, sharp as the morning frost that settled on every blade of grass. Harper felt it deep in her gut, a sense of anticipation and dread that settled heavier than any autumn storm. There was no denying it now. The time for hiding was over. If Praxis and Briggs Maddox wanted Scout, they'd have to come and take him. But this time, Harper wouldn't be alone, and she wouldn't be unprepared. The plan unfolded quickly. Reyes coordinated with the U.S. Marshals, moving pieces into place like a general planning for battle. Dalton briefed Harper on every detail, which routes would be watched, where the Marshals would hide, which signals to use if anything went wrong. Even Scout seemed to understand the shift, his movements more deliberate, his eyes locked on Harper at every turn. It started with a simple online post. Harper, under a fake name, listing a rare bay gelding, military-trained, urgent rehoming on an equestrian forum, known for drawing the interest of people in the trade. Within hours, the account received a direct message, full of coded language and a number Harper recognized from the files Reyes had sent her. It was Praxis, all right. Or, more specifically, it was Maddox. Harper answered the message with shaky hands, sticking to the script Reyes had drilled into her. Buyer can inspect horse and Old cattle yard, west of Loveland, midnight. Cash only. No questions. Reyes and the marshals set up the sting in the old cattle yard, a sprawling, half-abandoned place, where the wind rattled tin roofs and the only neighbors were prairie dogs and ghosts. The team arrived early, sweeping the area for hidden surveillance. Harper arrived with Dalton and Scout, the horse's muscles twitching beneath her touch, as if he could feel every ripple of tension in the air. She led Scout into the holding pen, heart thudding so hard she was sure he could hear it. The marshals melted into the shadows, radios crackling softly as they checked in with Reyes. Harper stood with Scout in the moonlight, one hand on his withers, forcing herself to breathe slow and deep. "Stay with me, buddy," she whispered, stroking his mane. "Just a little longer." They didn't have to wait long. Headlights sliced through the dark. A black SUV crawled down the gravel lane, headlights off until the last second. It stopped outside the fence. 3 men stepped out. Maddox was easy to spot, broad, square-shouldered, moving with the cocky swagger of someone who'd never had to fear consequences. He wore a faded ball cap, but Harper recognized the hard lines of his face, the same eyes that had haunted Scout's nightmares. Maddox surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of a predator. "You the seller?" His voice was cold, calculated. Harper nodded, forcing herself to keep her hands loose at her sides. "He's there." "Sound horse? Military trained? You want to see his papers?" "Papers don't matter," Maddox said, a smirk curling his lip. "Just need to check the animal. You said he was big." "Bay. Star on the brow?" "Exactly," Harper replied. She unlatched the pen and walked Scout out into the open, heart hammering with every step. Scout stiffened the moment Maddox drew near, muscles bunching under his skin. The horse's ears flattened, his nostrils flaring with recognition and fear. Maddox stepped closer, reaching for Scout's halter. "Let's see what you got, boy." The moment Maddox's hand moved towards Scout's face, the horse went rigid, eyes wide. For a breathless instant, the world seemed to freeze. Then, as Maddox barked a harsh command, "Stand still!" Scout reared up, powerful and wild, striking out with his hooves. Harper staggered back as Scout's massive body blocked her from Maddox, his front legs pawing the air in warning. Everything erupted at once. Maddox's men reached for their guns, but the marshals swept in with a roar, shouts of "Federal agents! Down on the ground!" echoing off the metal walls. Dalton tackled one of Maddox's goons, pinning him with military precision. Another marshal cuffed the second man before he could make it 3 steps. Maddox tried to run, cursing and swinging at the nearest marshal, but Scout lunged again, forcing him to stumble and fall flat in the dirt. The marshals had him on the ground in seconds, guns drawn, boots grinding gravel. Harper watched it all unfold, breath caught in her chest, a surreal sense of relief flooding her as the threat was finally contained. Scout's flanks heaved, sweat streaming down his sides. He circled back to Harper, pressing his head against her shoulder, trembling but unbowed. Harper wrapped her arms around his neck, tears pricking her eyes, tears she'd held back for years, for battles lost and won, for every night she'd wondered if this day would ever come. A marshal checked Maddox for weapons, barking orders into his radio. Reyes appeared at Harper's side, face grave and determined. "We got them, Lane. It's over. You and Scout, you did it." But Harper barely heard him. She sank to her knees beside Scout, the adrenaline draining away, replaced by something like awe. The horse had remembered. He'd protected her, just as she'd promised to protect him. The nightmare had come full circle. But this time, they were the ones standing when the dust cleared. Reyes clapped a hand on Harper's shoulder. "You were brave. Both of you. We've got enough evidence now to take Praxis apart, piece by piece." Dalton approached, bruised but grinning. "Hell of a show, Lane. Never seen a horse do half of what he just did." Harper smiled through her tears, scratching Scout behind the ears. "He's not just any horse." The marshals loaded Maddox and his men into waiting cruisers, reading them their rights. Harper watched Maddox's face, saw the fury, the impotence of a man finally brought down by the very animals he thought disposable. She hoped he'd remember this night every time he closed his eyes. Reyes walked with Harper back to the trailer, the cattle yard now quiet except for the soft nicker of Scout. "We'll get you and Scout to safety for the next few days," he said. "But the hard part's over. You faced the darkness and made it blink. Harper hugged Scout tightly, feeling the weight of it all. The years of silence, the pain, the hope she'd almost forgotten how to hold. You didn't just survive, she whispered into Scout's mane. You saved us both. As dawn approached, painting the world in pale pinks and gold, Harper and Scout stood at the edge of the empty yard, their shadows long and unbroken. The sun rose on a new day, one that promised justice, not just for Scout, but for every lost animal, every scarred survivor who'd ever been told they were disposable. Harper looked into Scout's dark, wise eyes and smiled. We did it, together. And for the first time since before the war, Harper truly believed it. Dawn crept over the Colorado plains, pale gold pouring through clouds, catching on the frost-laced grass and the battered old barn at Harper's ranch. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter, a storm finally spent. But inside the house, Harper's nerves were still raw, her body moving through the rituals of mourning in a daze. The faces of the night before, Maddox in handcuffs, Praxis's men sullen and silent, Scout's wild, defiant eyes, lingered behind her eyelids every time she blinked. The marshals kept Harper and Scout under tight protection, shuttling them from the cattle yard to a safe house in town. Scout loaded into the trailer without fuss, as if he understood they weren't running. They were seeing this through. Reyes stayed close, making calls, texting updates, checking in with the agents processing the evidence. It all moved fast. Faster than Harper expected. The capsule Dr. Shelby had removed from Scout's neck proved to be the smoking gun. The FBI's cybercrime unit decrypted the data in under 24 hours, piecing together a mountain of evidence: GPS logs, supply manifests, encrypted communications, lists of code names, and offshore wire transfers. It was the kind of damning, irrefutable truth that shattered companies and sent men like Maddox behind bars for decades. Harper watched the news unfold from the safe house, sitting cross-legged on a thin mattress with Scout's head resting in her lap. Every major network ran the story. Military horse exposes smuggling ring, one headline read. Covert animal couriers at center of international scandal, another blared. Praxis Equine Security's office was raided before noon. The company's CEO was arrested at a private airstrip, caught trying to flee the country with a briefcase of cash and a passport in a false name. But it was the horses Harper cared about most. Reyes called her with the updates. We're finding them, Lane. Dozens, maybe more. Stashed at holding facilities, private ranches, abandoned stockyards. Some of them are alive. Some didn't make it. Each word hit Harper like a hammer. She thought of Scout, battered but unbroken, and wondered how many others had suffered alone. The marshals kept her informed as the operation swept across state lines. Veterinarians deployed, volunteers organizing rescues, law enforcement interviewing witnesses, and former Praxis employees. For days, it felt like the world was catching up with the truth Scout had carried home. On the third day, Reyes arrived at the safe house, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his tired eyes. You did it, he said simply. We couldn't have blown the lid off without you, or Scout. Harper looked at Scout, who nickered softly, nudging her shoulder. He saved himself, she replied. I just gave him a place to land. Reyes sat beside her, handing over a folder of paperwork, legal documents, affidavits, and at the top, an official certificate. The Army's awarding Scout full military honors, Medal of Service. He's being recognized as a veteran, property of the United States, and then, as of today, released to you. Permanently. No more gray area. No more threats. Harper ran her fingers over the embossed seal, eyes stinging. Scout seemed to sense the moment, standing still as Reyes draped a blue and gold ribbon around his neck. There were no bugles, no marching bands, just the wind rattling the safe house window, or in the soft warmth of Scout's breath in Harper's palm. As the news spread, the phone rang with calls from reporters, other veterans, animal rights groups, even strangers moved by the story. Harper answered few of them. She didn't care about fame. She just wanted to go home, to walk the old fence line with Scout and remember what peace felt like. Reyes, though, insisted on one last stop. "Come with me," he said, leading Harper outside, where the sun was sinking low and the air smelled of rain. He opened the trunk of his sedan and pulled out a battered photo. Scout, years younger, standing at attention beside Harper in the desert camo. The edges were worn, the colors faded, but the bond between horse and soldier blazed clear as ever. "He outlived the war," Reyes said softly. "You both did." Harper held the photo in trembling hands. Memories crashed over her, the fear, the loss, the desperate hope that Scout had made it out alive. And now here he was, a living witness, his scars a testament to everything they'd survived. Back at the ranch, after the safe house was cleared and the marshals assured her the threat was past, Harper led Scout into the wide, open paddock. The grass had started to green again, new shoots pushing up through old mud. Scout shook his mane, eyes bright in the dusk. For a moment, he stood motionless, nose to the wind, as if saying goodbye to everything that had come before. Then he bolted, powerful, free, tearing across the pasture, kicking up clods of earth. Harper laughed, the sound rusty with disuse, and climbed the fence to watch him run. Every line of his body was poetry in motion, a living declaration of survival and stubborn hope. Reyes came up behind her, leaning on the fence rail. "He's home now," he said. "So am I," Harper replied, feeling the truth settle deep in her bones. The next morning, the last of the marshals packed up and left, leaving Harper and Scout alone for the first time in weeks. The house was silent except for the tick of the old clock and the occasional whicker from the barn. Harper wandered from room to room, touching old photographs, dog-eared letters, medals tucked in drawers, a lifetime of memories, pain, and healing. She found herself drawn outside, to the paddock where Scout was grazing, sunlight painting his scars gold. She stroked his neck, leaning into his warmth. "We made it," she whispered. "You're safe. We both are." For the first time in years, Harper let herself believe it. Later that day, the local paper sent a reporter to take a photo for the Sunday edition. Harper stood beside Scout, hand resting on his withers, the battered deployment photo tucked in her jacket pocket. She didn't smile for the camera, but Scout flicked his ears, eyes calm and wise. When the reporter asked what she would say to others fighting their own battles, Harper thought for a moment before replying. "Survival isn't about winning every fight," she said quietly. "It's about holding on until help comes, and when you get the chance, helping someone else find their way home." As the sun set, casting long shadows over the open fields, Harper stood with Scout at the edge of the pasture, watching the world turn golden and new. There was healing ahead, for both of them. And for every survivor still out there, running from a past that wouldn't let go, their story was proof that even the deepest scars could lead you home. 6 months had passed since the night when everything changed. Spring came late that year, as if even the earth had needed time to recover. By April, the land surrounding Harper's ranch was alive again, meadows brushed with gold, wildflowers crowding the fence line, and a sweet wind rolling down from the distant Rockies. In that gentle green, the past felt further away with each sunrise. Harper's mornings found new rhythm now. Her days no longer began with anxiety or the sound of alarms, but with the warm nicker of Scout greeting the dawn and the laughter of children and veterans gathering at the ranch's old wooden gate. Word of Scout's story had spread, drawing in people who carried wounds like Harper's, some visible, some hidden deep beneath skin and silence. Together, they worked to make something, healing out of everything broken. Harper started a program for veterans and local teens with trauma, opening her gates to anyone who needed to learn trust again. The first session had been awkward. Old soldiers with hard eyes and soft voices, teens who'd forgotten how to smile. But Scout was patient, and Harper learned to be gentle, to wait out the storms behind every story. There were mornings when the pain in the air was almost too much, when the barn seemed heavy with unshed tears. But Scout became a bridge between people, never judging, always steady, letting fear and sadness flow out of the world for a little while. The boy who changed everything arrived one Saturday. He couldn't have been more than 12, a small thing with haunted eyes sent by a foster family who'd run out of ideas. He hovered at the edge of the group, shoulders hunched, fists tight at his sides. Harper watched him from a distance, recognizing the way he scanned every exit, the way he never let anyone stand behind him. He was silent all morning, flinching at loud noises, refusing to make eye contact. At lunch, when most of the group went inside, Harper found the boy sitting alone in the barn, knees drawn up to his chest. Scout stood a few feet away, eating hay with slow, rhythmic calm. The boy watched the horse, his breathing shallow. "Do you want to say hello?" Harper asked, kneeling beside him. "You don't have to. Scout's just glad for the company." The boy shook his head at first, but Harper didn't press. She just sat with him, silence stretching soft and easy between them. After a while, Scout wandered closer. He lowered his massive head, nostrils flaring, and waited. The boy tensed, shrinking back. Harper stayed still, barely breathing. Then Scout did something remarkable. He knelt, folding his front legs beneath him, a gesture of trust, surrender, and understanding. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the boy reached out, hands trembling, and touched Scout's cheek. He buried his face in the horse's mane and sobbed, soundless and fierce, letting years of pain pour out. Scout stood perfectly still, taking the weight of the boy's grief, unflinching. Harper blinked back tears. She'd seen Scout calm battle-hardened men and soothe the jittery hearts of wild foals, but this was the miracle she hadn't dared to hope for. By sunset, the boy was riding Scout around the paddock, Harper leading them both. The boy's shoulders had loosened, his eyes brighter, a shy smile flickering at the corners of his mouth. When his foster parents came to pick him up, he hugged Scout's neck and whispered, "Thank you," before slipping away. Moments like these became the soul of the ranch. Each week, new faces arrived, some anxious, some angry, some too weary to speak. Harper saw herself in all of them, people searching for a way out of the dark. She worked with them in the barn, teaching them to brush Scout's coat, to muck stalls, to trust the gentle rhythm of an animal's heartbeat. The ranch became a sanctuary, Scout the living proof that survival was possible, that even the deepest scars could heal. For Harper, healing was slow. Some nights the old nightmares still came, the roar of helicopters, the stench of burning sand, the fear of never coming home. But each time she woke, Scout was there, waiting. In his presence, the worst memories lost their power. She learned to let herself feel joy again, to ride with the wind in her hair, to laugh with the veterans around the campfire, to watch the sun rise without counting every threat on the horizon. On the anniversary of Scout's rescue, Harper organized a small gathering at the ranch. Reyes and Dalton came, along with Dr. Shelby and half a dozen veterans who'd found new strength working with the horses. There was no ceremony, no speeches, just a quiet meal, old war stories traded for tales of healing and hope. As the sun set, Harper led Scout out into the meadow. She mounted him bareback, letting him choose the pace, the direction, the path through waving grass. As they galloped together, Scout's scars shone gold in the dying light, the wind singing through his mane. Harper closed her eyes, feeling every muscle, every breath, every memory that had brought them to this place. For the first time, the past no longer felt like a weight, but a testament. They had survived, and in surviving, they'd found purpose. At the fence, the group watched, silent and moved. The boy from the barn, now smiling with easy confidence, waved as Scout thundered past. Harper caught the gesture and smiled back, her heart full. As the dusk fell, Harper slipped from Scout's back, standing in the long grass, arms around his strong neck. She whispered, "You didn't just survive? You brought the whole damn truth back." Scout nickered, a sound full of pride and peace. In that instant, Harper understood the meaning of all their pain, not just to endure, but to help others heal. She walked to the edge of the meadow, Scout at her side, the world painted in the colors of forgiveness and hope. She looked back at the friends gathered, the ranch aglow in lantern light, and felt gratitude so fierce it almost hurt. The wind carried her voice as she spoke, quiet but determined. Some carry war, others outrun it. But this one, he brought it home to heal the rest of us. She turned to the camera set up by a volunteer, voice soft but strong, a message for anyone still listening, anyone still lost. If this story struck something in you, share it. Somewhere out there, another soul's still waiting to come home. And as the sky deepened, Scout galloped free through the open pasture, scars healed by time and love, while Harper watched him with tears in her eyes, grateful finally to be home.